So, our next presenter is going to be Sztankó Dóra, who is a developer in the application security team, and she's going to be sharing some of the best practices with you, and maybe some of the not so good practices as well, and how to avoid them in a GCP-driven environment regarding security, of course. So, please welcome Dóra.
Dora, and I am part of the application security team at It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you very much for all of you to come in. Because actually this is the very first time when I had the chance to talk about security-related topic. So I'm quite excited, and yeah, as the title says, it's going to be some practical encounter of security practices on Google Cloud, and I'd also like to share with you some of my favorite lessons that we learned throughout the years. So yeah, in the next, I don't know, 20 minutes, I'd like you to accompany me on this journey, and actually I'd like to tell you the evolution, how we started to use the GCP, and well, I'm not going to talk about the data aspects of it, like just Chubby did. However, I'm going to go with the in general, the resource hierarchy that you can build up in GCP, user authentication, authorization, and IAM best practices. Yeah, maybe, we will see. So, it was already mentioned, I just wanted to show you that if you're not familiar with Imasis, what we are doing, yeah, we are developing this kind of fancy marketing platform with which you can do one-on-one personalized marketing, and well, I really hope it works because it seems to be working. So, but what is the reason I'm here and I'm talking about this? Why security is important nowadays, and why GCP is important to me? Well, I don't know if you know about Imasis, but just like I said, I am a software developer as well, and we are doing development operations as well at the company, because it's not so common that, you know, the software developer who just sits in the corner and just writing code and talking about design patterns and struggling with naming variables, so it's a bit over it, because we also need to do development operations. So it's so much better because you have the chance to see your code coming alive, which is very good. And I just wanted to mention that security is something like this. So at Imasis, we think that security is important and it's part of our everydays. So just like DevOps and SecDevOps. The other thing is this cloud buzz that we have. You know, every company says that, okay, let's move to the cloud because we're not able to do this whole thing on-premise because it's not scalable anymore. It's quite easy to use, it's quite abstract for us. Like I said, for software developers it's also easy to use, so we can understand. We don't need to know all the bits, how such cloud system works. But if you're willing to learn, then you can learn such fun things. The awareness is just like I said. It's a very important aspect of software development. The security itself, not just application security, but also how it appears during building an infrastructure. And I just love it, the whole GCP stuff. So I can talk about it for hours, and actually I thought one of my colleagues struggled with a different Slack channel with some permissions, and it was not my job. I saw it and I was like, oh, I'm here to help. I know it's a bit of exaggeration, but why? What is the purpose that I'd really like you to take home with you is that I'm going to be happy if you just think by the end of this presentation that security is something that you should care about, and you should own it a bit, because we're all in this together. So I know it's a GCP meetup, but I don't know just half of the audience. So I wanted to ask, how many of you is an IT personnel? I'd like to see some raising hands. So developers and stuff. Oh, cool. How many of you have ever worked with any type of cloud technology? Yeah, okay. And how many of you work with GCP? Oh, horses. Okay, cool. I'm happy then because I don't need to go into the very deepest, darkest places of cloud technologies. So the first thing that I'd like you to see is this shared responsibility model. Let's see this. These are the on-premise means that you have everything under the roof. So you're responsible for the hardware, the infrastructure, the network. Like you can see, the operation system, applications, data, user access. Everything is under your control. I'm going to explain these abbreviations. Infrastructure as a service, it means that you own the infrastructure, you're responsible for, as you can see, from user access. It's just a simplified chart, of course, but from user access to network. However, these layers, like physical ones, are not part of your responsibility. You're not able to control them. The next phase is the platform as a service. This is something like, I don't know if you're familiar with Heroku. We work a lot with Heroku. These applications are made for developers, and you're able to deploy applications to it with a single button. So it's quite simple to use it. We use it a lot. We built the whole microservice architecture on it, so we really loved it. And the fourth one is the SaaS, which is the software as a service. This is just like Gmail, for example. It's built on GCP, and you can access the data, and you can do like on Google Drive, you can use some user access. But the other aspects of this responsibility tree is just not under your control. Oh, that one, sorry. Cool. So, let's start the journey, because everything starts somewhere, and the first step you need to know to start working with GCP is that you need someone who has a debit card or a credit card, because I don't know if you're familiar with this, but on cloud you pay for everything that you use, so for the resources. If you consider table, you don't need to pay for, I don't know, creating the table. You need to pay for the data store. Or in case of, for example, networking, you don't need to pay for, I don't know, creating a subnetwork. But if it's really used, then it can be quite expensive. So, the first entity that you need to create if you start to use GCP is an organization. It's quite simple, I don't know, it can be example.com or meetup.com or emasis.com. Actually, it's not so much that you can screw at this point, so let's just go to the next step. We made some conventions, like naming conventions, because we worked with and still working with the continuous integration and deployment. So we're deploying our applications every single day and on almost every single commit. And of course, we're having staging environments and production environments. And we felt that we need this kind of separation on GCP. So when we decided to create our first application there, of course, we separated it on project level. So we called it the staging and the production project under the organization itself, just bed. The next one, and here comes the interesting part. We didn't have at that time these company managed Google accounts, so we needed to go to use the GCP with personal accounts. For example, mine was my personal account. We have this kind of inventory where we store that I'm responsible for this account, and yeah, I'm going to use it for GCP, and then I just start to use it on GCP. And the fourth one is when you create a project, of course, I am the creator of the project, so you're going to be the owner. On GCP, you can, the service that handles these permissions, user permissions, is called IAM. And in IAM, you can grant roles to individuals, and these roles can be predefined roles like owner, and can be custom roles, for example. But the owner part means that if you're granted to use an entity, like any kind of resource, which can be an organization or a project or just a compute engine, then the highest level you're on, like an organization, these roles will be inherited for every project. So yeah, this was very early stages of our GCP existence and in our economy itself. So we can say that there were some places for improvement. So we actually started to read the actual documentations on about how to do it properly or how it's suggested and so on. So the first thing that came is that under an organization you can create these items called folders, which are logical collectors, and you can collect all your projects under one folder. And this way it's more easier to you to control the permissions regarding these projects. So for example, if you have a new member in your team and you have a collection of your employees in the team, you don't need to, for example, grant access to every single project. You just need to add that permission to this resource, which is actually a collector folder. And here you can see the improvements. So for example, in case of organizations, we realized that it's not a good practice to grant owner permission to everyone, because everyone can make mistakes. So we had such failures when, for example, I remember this story when someone was over-granted, like was able to read data and modify data in one of the projects, which was not the developer's project, but he developed some kind of a local script which was not properly configured. So actually he thought that he starts to delete the tables in his development project, but it turned out that actually he was starting to delete data from the production project, which was quite fun to restore, but it's also possible in GCP. So I'll be referring to this privilege principle. My favorite example is that if you'd like to ask your buddy to go to the shop, you won't give him all your wallet with all your money and cash. You'll just give him, I don't know, 500 forints and go away, because as he can make a mistake and lose my wallet or lose my 500 forint, well, it's not even. So I already mentioned the folder structure. It's very handy, and it's like I showed you, it's recommended to use your resource hierarchy like that. The third one is the personal accounts. Well, to be fully aware of your GCP organization, you need to, of course, you need some checks. So in this case, we had these personal accounts, and we needed to repeatedly check if no malicious user is added to our system. So we had this inventory of the personal accounts, and we also had our GCP environment, and we needed to make sure that no one else is adding to this environment. So there was this issue when unfortunately our chainsaw was also not properly configured, so we actually deleted quite a few production-related accounts from this GCP, I think from a couple of GCP projects. But it was also an incident where we learned a lot, also about how to stand up after such failure. And I also mentioned the usages of the groups, because it's quite important. So, as the company just grew, and there were so many developers who were fascinated by this whole GCP technology, and we started to write more and more or deploy more and more applications to GCP. Of course, the requirements started to grow, and our organization started to grow. But also don't forget that behind this GCP stuff, there's always developers. So the GCP is also improved itself. So there were a couple of enhancements that we wanted to apply as well. In our organization case, the complexity is just starting to grow because we had so many teams working with the GCP, and also we wanted to make it clear this resource hierarchy, because it could become a mess. However, at the trigger, when we started to be more and more, so when we had to pay more attention on security part, is when we started to deploy a Kubernetes cluster to one of our to our GCP environment. And the reason why we needed to do this is because we needed to migrate from the Heroku, from the platform as a service solution. So I remember that back at that time we needed to do a lot of research on different kinds of security-related topics, like how to properly deal with users in a corporate environment, how to make sure that during the deployment process that your binary is not corrupted, how to do binary authorization, how to be alerted on if something is messed up with your production environment, and so on and so on. So we needed to do these steps. Like it was quite clear that from personal accounts we needed to switch to company managed accounts, and this was a huge step for us, because from this point, like, I'm not going to go to GCP to authorize myself with my personal account. However, the company will manage my company managed account, of course, to be able to authorize myself against the system. And it's a good thing because it can be controlled remotely by our centralized office IT, for example, and they can force me to, for example, use a second factor authentication on my account, which is a good thing, because if I lose my personal account, then nobody can actually, for example, shut it down. So anyone who stole it is able to actually enter into this GCP environment, because I lost my password. And the fourth one is still the fine-grained team permission handling, which is that we not only have managed accounts, but also managed groups. So for now, we can say that we have kind of this hybrid environment, which means that on-premise we have an Active Directory where all our employee users and groups are living there, and they are provisioned to be G Suite accounts, and this way we're able to communicate with the GCP environment. This is where I wanted to show you that our Kubernetes cluster is connected to our on-premise services. Of course, it's not an interconnect solution, it's something else, but it's sufficient for us. And also we have other services, and as our organization grew, we started to take more measures in terms of security. So for example, we have a part of this environment when we actually restrict all the APIs. So you can, for example, you can do such settings that some services are only available from static IP addresses, and you can do such filtering. What is the dream? The dream is, I wouldn't say it's simple, but quite reasonable. So, I don't know if you've ever heard of the infrastructure as code. It means that when actually, for example, I'm creating a table in BigQuery, then of course I'm clicking, for example, on the UI. Or I can use a command line tool for it. Or I can write some piece of code to call the I don't know, push request of creating a table. Or, for example, I can use Terraform, which is one of the implementations of infrastructure as a code. So actually, you write code to create a table. It's not magic. In the background, it's also the same post request. It's just so good to have your cloud environment written in code. It's version controlled as well. So when you, for example, create a table, it will go through some kind of a pipeline, and then it will be asked if you're allowed to, for example, create that table. Because everything costs something. So, for example, right now, I'm owner of projects, and I could be able to create such resources that are very expensive. Of course, I don't want to because it's not my purpose. But no one is validating this action of mine. And I think this would be the dream to control some parts of our environment with this process. And then, as you can see, this security foundation model, I think this can be boundary, because all the aspects that I was talking about are preventative controls. So security works like you need to do security good, and you can only make mistake once, and that's enough, because then your integrity is broken. So these features are all preventative features. However, if you experience some malicious attempt or anomaly, then here comes the detection part. So you need to figure out what happened. It was really an issue that happened in the system. You need to alert the teams and so on. So in my mind, this would be such a dream. But don't forget that we started to use GCP from day 0, and then as we improved, the cloud provider also improved. So we have an ongoing production system, and if we want to change it, then we have to think it over twice, because we can break something that is actually in production. Of course, don't forget that just like I said, these are all developers sitting behind computers and making mistakes. And most of the features are usually beta features, of course. However, mistakes can happen. And the third one is the continuous learning part, that you have to go with the improvements of the cloud provider. You need to read documents, you need to improve your application, because the more security you want to do, the more you have to know about the cloud provider. And actually, this was the end of my presentation. I just wanted to show you this very basics of our cloud infrastructure. And if you have any questions, then just don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I actually remember that once I was the victim of the chase, so we're still working together. My question is that you put that dream state. You put that dream state for
yes.
Have you implemented already any part of it, or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. But you plan to do it?
Yes, of course.
Can I ask how many projects you have, how many users, or how complex it is?
Projects, I think a couple of hundreds, 700s, yes, 700s. The users are, well, I think the colleagues, which is around also a couple of hundreds, and we have this wonderful solution that was built by the Elise team. So we also had a couple of groups that includes customer email addresses, so that I think multiplies the number of users in GCP.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. You said that day zero you've researched what sort of cloud computing cloud platforms providers to use, why Lucy's used Google Cloud, why not Microsoft or Amazon or some other provider other than Google?
So the question is if we made some research or?
No, why did you choose Google?
GCP, oh, I see. Well, because of Elise and I don't really know what was the main purpose. I know that we worked with, so we were also present on Amazon as well, but well, mainly GCP. I think we just simply liked the features that it provided, so it was actually those services. I remember that back in the days, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, when we started to struggle with that we don't have enough space to store all our data because it's just impossible to process it. And there was this wonderful service provided by GCP, which is called Dataflow, which is able to large-scale data processing. And we started to write these data flows. Because before security, I was part of the data engineering team, and we started to write these data processors, and I think we're just found it very comfortable and reasonable to use. So we had such good experience with it.
Thank you.
Can you say, so you said we didn't know all the things we know now. And what is there something which you would most address with your knowledge and practical experience from now for the beginning? So what was maybe the biggest mistake which you might explain at the beginning, maybe from a practical perspective or from a principle perspective?
I think I would say it was one thing that was hard, that it was a single team who started to work with GCP, so the knowledge was not shared across the company. So I think it was like living in a bubble. That was one thing. But what I would have done from the beginning, actually, I wanted to say the company managed accounts, but at that point we was not sure that. I think we didn't know that it grew that much, or grow that much. Sorry. So maybe I would say that just like Chubby said in his presentation, that at the beginning it was enough that it fulfilled our expectations with the data streaming and data handling, but we should have moved forward and, okay, let's just check our, for example, project permissions, and remove those users who are not necessary to be there. So some more, I don't know, consciousness from that perspective, just to look forward of data processing and check other layers of security. I think I would say that. It's quite abstract, but something like this.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for your attention.